And now, after having understood how the Indian market and then European market work, and then relative comparison, and the point that I mentioned in the morning, Susanta Chatterjee will now talk about what is the way forward for Indian day-ahead market, and taking into consideration the various initiatives that we have taken. And obviously, this will be based on interactions and a lot of learning of experience, what is happening around the world, especially in EU.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I think towards the end and closing to lunchtime, but I think we have one more session on the real-time market before we go for lunch. So I will try to be brief, but having understood how the Indian power market operates in the existing, especially the power exchange market operates, I mean, basically my presentation would highlight how and what we are going to do in future, or what we are thinking as regulators in terms of the overall redesign of the wholesale energy market here in India. Just a brief background of how India has evolved in the electricity sector over the period. We have moved from the vertically integrated, I mean, up to 1990s, we were a vertically integrated entity, GTD, retail, everything was vertically integrated. Gradually, we unleashed ourselves and we unbundled, and today we boast of having a multi-buyer and multi-seller kind of a power system operation, where we have large number of generators, transcos, distribution companies, 2 power exchanges, a large number of trading licenses as well, and also the system operators. We have 1 at the national level, 5 in the 5 regions, and then each state, each of the 29 states has 1 load dispatch center. So that's how, in terms of the existing contracting that we have here in India, and it was already highlighted by Rajesh in his presentation, that about 89 to 90% of the contracts today are under long-term contracting, which is about 25 years or so. So only 10 to 11%, and of course the figures as came out in the presentation of this is yours, that the short-term share has been increasing, but by and large we have been hovering around 10% in terms of, so our contracting is by and large the long-term contracting that we have today. In terms of the scheduling and dispatch, all the contracts that we have, they get scheduled on a day-ahead basis or on real-time basis. So even the long-term contracts that we have, they get scheduled on a day-ahead basis. So this is what we call, the large part is scheduled through a mechanism called self-scheduling mechanism. Self-scheduling is a very common term in international parlance, and of late in India also we have started using this term. It means that the distribution companies, the load serving entities who have contracts with the generators, would schedule the generators physically. So if Discom A, distribution company A, has a contract with a generator G, he will tell on a day-ahead basis that I have a contract for 1000 megawatt with you, and I am scheduling you, and if you are available, I am asking you to generate, say, 900 megawatt out of it for me. So this is called self-scheduling. So you don't need to necessarily declare the variable cost of that generation. So self-scheduling means almost like a physical delivery. So predominantly in India, we have a self-scheduling on a day-ahead basis, which happens. But we also have market-based scheduling and dispatch through the power exchanges, which is a very minuscule percentage of the overall generation, which ultimately gets scheduled. It is in this context, I mean, that the country has been thinking in terms of reforms as to how to go about bringing about changes in the way the current Indian market operates. And before I highlight what exactly are the thought processes and where we found there are gaps and there are scopes for improvement, I would like to briefly touch upon this segment, this slide, which basically talks of three segments of the market. One, the day-ahead market, the other, the real-time market, and third component, which is basically the ancillary services or system imbalances. This is a very prototype kind of a market design that we talk of. And generally, both the day-ahead market and the real-time real-time market cater to your energy needs. And your system imbalance or ancillary services are meant to take care of your inadvertent imbalances. In India, historically, the way we have functioned, we have had predominantly the day-ahead scheduling, largely the self-scheduling that I briefly mentioned, where you don't need to declare the variable cost. You decide as a load-serving entity based on your portfolio of purchases, how much you want to schedule from which generator. And to the system operator, you only need to give the volumes, that volume of electricity that you want to get from a particular generator. So system marginal price does not get discovered in this method of self-scheduling. This is one of the findings that we have had while we were studying the market design internationally. And the other missing point that we have had was that after the day-ahead scheduling, we have had only the last segment, which is the system imbalance segment, which we called at one point of time the unscheduled interchange or the deviation settlement mechanism. So we did not really have, until the recent past, any opportunity of sale and purchase of energy between the day-ahead and the imbalance settlement. And after the power exchanges were brought in place, an element of intraday market was introduced. But then again, I think Chairman CERC also mentioned in his opening remarks that intraday market is not liquid, and it has its own infirmities, and we analyzed as to why this has not really taken off to the extent it should have. And we also, based on our own understanding and analysis of the international market designs, power market designs internationally, we came to the conclusion that we really need to clearly define this segment, that you need a robust and a liquid day-ahead market, which is not necessarily predominantly based on self-scheduling, but predominantly based on the economic dispatch model. And as I mentioned, and I would like to highlight this word, the self-scheduling. Self-scheduling, the biggest disadvantage is that you do not end up coming up with a system marginal cost. So if each of the load-serving entities tries to schedule its generation based on its own portfolio of purchases, then the true system marginal cost is not known, because as a load-serving entity, you are not obliged to declare the variable cost of the generator which you are scheduling. So this scheduling takes that important element of price visibility from the market. But then this is how historically our contract has been, and based on this understanding and based on this analysis, we thought that let us work more in terms of the redesigning of these three segments and move to the next level of reforms. And this is one analysis which we have already highlighted in the discussion paper that we have come up with in terms of the scope for optimization. We found that self-scheduling leads to a lot of inefficiency in terms of system operation, because each distribution company would look at the variable cost of his own contracted power and schedule. So quite often it so happens that when you pull all of them together, you find that some of the cheaper generation, which a particular distribution company might be having contract with is remaining idle because he does not need that, but it cannot be used by any other distribution company because he does not have a contract with that. That's the bane of a self-scheduling mechanism. That's the analysis, internal analysis, which we did for last 6 months. In fact, more than 6 months, we did a very rigorous exercise based on the 5 states data which we could collate. And we did a very simple Python-based analysis to pool together the generation resources of all the distribution companies. And instead of each DISCOM-wise dispatch, we tried to dispatch the generation sources based on the variable cost at the pool level for the 5 states. And we found that you could see in this graph, the red portions are the ones which are cheaper generation but are remaining unutilized, whereas you have higher generations because all the generation has been stacked in terms of their variable cost, in terms of their energy cost from the left side to the right hand side. So if some red portion is there on the left hand side, it means some cheaper generation is not fully utilized. So this utilization, optimum utilization is possible only when you pool all of them together. And this is how we thought that we should be encouraging more what we have termed as a market-based economic dispatch. So, and this is the kind of framework where we want to move is what we have provided and explained in our paper, that on the left-hand side is what our existing framework is, and this is the existing framework where we are saying that this is what we call silo-based self-scheduling, that each DISCOM would schedule based on his own contract. This is what is happening now. And he cannot look at or possibly schedule any cheaper generation which is remaining unutilized in this part. So we want to break these walls in the new mechanism. And in the new mechanism, we are saying that you continue to have all the comforts. We have tried to handle several issues. I mean, it might not be possible to go into details. The details are there in the discussion paper. But by and large, what we are saying that let all these generators declare their marginal cost or their variable cost and bid into a pool, into a market, and let all these distribution companies also come to this market. And but then there are issues like security of supply. They have also been ensured, but in trying to bring this model, you are trying to bring in the element of what we are calling as the true system marginal cost in the country. And it's basically a win-win situation. And the 5-state analysis which we have done has yielded the results of savings to the extent of about 6,000 crore for 1 year. So, which means it's a very simple thing that, I mean, here in this example, if you can dispatch all these cheaper generations which today are not getting dispatched, they will substitute or replace some of the high cost generation, which will naturally and always give you some savings. So it's a very simple arithmetic. So that is what the kind of analysis which we have done for 5 states has yielded us the savings to the extent of 6,000 crore, which we are missing today, and which as central regulator we are, and the detailed mechanism has been explained in the paper. We are conscious of the fact that we need to protect the legacy contracts. We cannot simply, some of these generators, as I said, some of the inefficient generators or high cost generators would get less dispatch now. Some of them might not get dispatch at all. What do you do with these assets? Do you completely abandon them, leave them in the large in the market, or do you protect these legacy contracts? We have tried to protect these legacy contracts through a unique mechanism of what we call the bilateral contract settlement, BCS, which is almost akin to CFD, which is contract for difference, but we have termed it as a settlement of bilateral contract. So that's how we are thinking in terms of doing that. These details are there in terms of, that's the broad architecture of the day ahead. We have also gone into detail as to how to handle the congestion, because the moment you go in for a market-based economic dispatch like the one that I described, power flow will undergo a significant change, because now the power will flow based on the marginal cost rather than based on the contracts. So the transmission corridors which have come, the transmission capacities which have been created, they would be utilized in a different manner. So what impact will it have on the overall flow of the power system, etc.? That also we have analyzed, and we have found out the net gains in terms of this. The next, of course, I mean, it's not the subject matter of the panel discussion today, but we have also been working extensively on the real-time energy market, which is missing today. I mean, as I said, we have the intraday market which operates in the power exchange today, but it's in the classical sense of the term, it's not truly a real-time energy market is what we have. We also do not have, I mean, we have been talking about the gate closure. There are different provisions in the in IEGC in terms of 4 time blocks, the right to recall, etc. there are. But then again, in true sense of the term, we do not have that gate closure concept, which is also what we are wanting to bring in terms of the reforms in the real-time energy market. And here, as was being mentioned by Rajesh also, that possibly this is something missing, that the generators are not allowed to correct their positions. Once you have given your schedule, or you have been given some schedule on a day-ahead basis, that's it. You can only revise through unscheduled interchange, which is not correct. So now the real-time energy market that we have conceived is another opportunity which will be given to the generators and both the buyers as well to correct their positions, because 24 hours ahead, whatever you had projected, might not really be true when you come closer to real time. So you must get an opportunity for organized trade rather than overdraw from the grid or over-inject into the grid. So that's the basic intent of this kind of a market mechanism, and the kind of gate closure which it's an hourly market which we are wanting to bring, but then in 1 hour there will be 4 15-minute time block kind of markets, which is what we are. And the last segment is our ancillary services market, where, as was already mentioned, that today we already have introduced an administered ancillary services mechanism. It is not a market-based mechanism, so we are wanting to move to the next level of a market-based ancillary services mechanism. And the unique thing that we have talked about, at least in the discussion paper, is the need for a co-optimization of energy and ancillary services. Ancillary services procurement by itself may not really be the most cost-effective way of going forward. So we have talked of the co-optimization of real-time energy and ancillary, which is also a major issue which we are debating as to how to make this whole thing happen. And in terms of the challenges and the way forward, of course, these are the discussion papers which are already floated. Basically, we are the driver for the reforms is the need to achieve the greater economy and efficiency in the system and market operation. That's the one liner. That's the prime objective of all the reforms that we are wanting to bring about. And as I mentioned, we are working through these papers. We are also working on the transmission side, which is also critically important to make the wholesale market design a success. In terms of transmission planning, we have come up with a transmission planning regulation. We are also working on, again, another game changer, which is like your general network access, and also working on the next phase of reforms in terms of the transmission pricing, which put together with the redesign that we are thinking in terms of the wholesale market design, will ultimately help us achieve the first bullet, which is the greater economy and efficiency in the system and market operation. So, thank you. Thank you.